Okay, so any questions or comments about Freud and Jung?
Just curious about Jung. What do you see as his theory of neurosis and mental disorders? Or Freud was repression and failure of repression,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
right. Well, for Jung talked about a process he called individuation. And he felt that the aim of the psyche was to bring together opposite sides of the psyche, okay? So he was interested in achieving balance, and he called that process of evolving individuation. And he said, eventually, you come to not yourself, but the self. He used the capital letter, okay? So the aim was to come towards this difficult but difficult to achieve notion of self in which all these opposites
Are integrated.
And in some kind of balance with one another. So people who were neurotic were people who probably had difficulty, for example, in coming to terms with what he called their shadow. So the shadow was all the things that are in the first layer of the unconscious. It's all the things we don't want to admit to ourselves that we have all kinds of perverse, aggressive, sadistic fantasies, right? And faults, yeah, okay. So that was what he called the shadow, and he felt it was important to gradually integrate aspects of the shadow into your adult self. Okay. Then he also, just below the level of the shadow, he talked about the anima and the animus. And the anima was the female principle that was present in every man. Men don't like to normally admit to having what Jung would call feminine properties, feminine traits. Whereas someone like myself, I would say I'm 100% woman. But he said every man has an anima and every woman has an animus. They have a male. Now, his thinking from the point of view of feminism is stereotypical, right? He's kind of stereotyping what are male traits and what are female traits.
But they can be present in one and the same individual. You have both.
Yeah.
So
he would say you have both. You have both.
So did Freud.
What?
So did Freud. Well, he argued for innate bisexuality, certainly.
Yeah, but he got that idea from Wilhelm Fliess. Freud, one of Freud's mentors was a German doctor called ENT specialist called Wilhelm Fliess. Anyone ever heard of Wilhelm Fliess?
Yeah.
Have you heard of Wilhelm Fliess?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Freud-Fliess correspondence?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay. Well, Wilhelm Fliess was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And Peter, he had a very strange theory. Very strange. He thought that there was sexual tissue in the nose.
That's why Eskimos rub noses.
And therefore, the way to cure neurosis was to perform nasal operations. That was his belief. Okay. He also believed that we are all bisexual, which I would agree with. You know. So-
Actually, for Freud,
Yeah.
we were polymorphous perverse.
Yes,
We could
Freud's
have sex
express.
with
Freud's
anything.
express. He had this wonderful expression called polymorphous perversity.
That's where we refer to children as being.
Children's
Childish.
sexuality is polymorphous perverse.
Yeah.
Polymorphous perverse. Yeah.
So then everybody repressed either their masculine part or their feminine part, and then manifested
Yeah.
outwardly. And that may account for some of the now gender confusions that at a young age
Yeah.
physiological boy will say, no, I'm a girl.
Yeah.
From a Freudian perspective, it would be they're identifying with one of their parents, or it would be one of these early confusions that we have about who's who, and we're born competitive and hoardy creatures, and we don't know what to do with it, and it gets us into trouble.
Yeah. It gets us into trouble.
Our parents are not that good at helping us understand this about ourselves. They are part of a repressive kind of force where we're not really, some of our functions are taboo and problems, and we have to hide them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anything else about Freud and Jung? That we want to. Yeah.
Something about Lang,
Yeah.
because Lang was trained as a psychoanalyst, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how do you distinguish Langian from his psychodynamic kind of roots?
Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that next time. But
Uh-huh.
just briefly. See, Artie Lang was trained as both a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst. Okay. And he did his training in London. He did his psychoanalytic training in London. And the British Institute of Psychoanalysis, which was started by Ernest Jones, so we're now talking about the British School of Psychoanalysis, started by Ernest Jones. Well, eventually Anna Freud, Freud's daughter, became the sort of heir apparent of psychoanalysis when her father died in 1939. And then along came a woman named Melanie Klein. Has anyone ever heard of Melanie Klein? Melanie Klein. So when I was working at this adolescent unit, residential adolescent unit in London, so I was seeing people from the ages of 16 to 20, and they were living in the community, right? So my supervisor was a Kleinian. Okay? And he knew that I was also at the same time studying with Ronnie and doing a kind of apprenticeship in existential therapy. Okay. So Klein went even deeper than Freud, right back into the early first and second years of life. And she said there were two stages that had to be negotiated. She called the first the schizoid paranoid position, and the second was the depressed position. And this all takes place in the early years of life. And it has to do with the relation of the young baby's relation with the mother's breast. So you probably aren't aware of this all. But
Oh, yeah.
We are.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Forever being given books to read.
Okay. Okay. So the paranoid schizoid position is where you think one breast is good and the other breast is bad. Okay? So you have to negotiate that. You have to go into the depressed position where you realize that the good breast and the bad breast are in one person.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may add to this,
Yeah.
actually read a little bit about this because this is related to disorders such as if you buy into the DSM,
Yeah.
it's borderline and which relies on heavy splitting,
Splitting, yeah.
which is a primitive defense
Defense
mechanism,
mechanism. Yeah.
where you can't see in one and the same person both good qualities and bad qualities.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
either idealize or you
Or you write them off completely.
Yeah, you write them off, and this alternates. So this is a very heavy thing in BPD.
So take Jordan Peterson, for example.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, some people hate
Some
him,
people hate him,
Yeah,
and they don't see any good in anything that he has to see. Other people, like yourself, love him. Or is that going too far?
I love him. No, it's okay. I love him, but I don't think I idealize him, and I see some
Okay.
of his.
You see some of the.
Philosophically, he's.
You
not
see
as
how he could be.
sophisticated as he could be, but
Yeah.
I like him overall. But it is true. Some people truly idealize him. He's like a god.
He's
on
like a
earth.
god. This is a This is a U of T psychology professor, Jordan Peterson, who has become world famous.
Yeah.
He's become like a superstar,
And he's a Jungian, I should say.
and he's a Jungian. Yeah.
But regarding you said that one breast is good, the other one's bad.
Yeah.
When the mother is present and nurtures the child,
Yeah.
she's the good mother.
Yeah,
She's
she's
the
the
breast,
good
not
mother.
the breast that's feeding.
Yeah.
But when the breast is not available,
Yeah.
when the mother's away, she's the bad mother.
Yeah.
And then the child realizes, oops, this
Yeah.
is the same person in fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is able to, and once he integrates that information,
Yeah.
he falls into the so-called depressive position. It's
Yeah.
like realizing,
Yeah.
oops, the world is both the good and the
And
bad
bad.
place, and
Yeah.
it's with this kind of this realization brings you into the more mature kind of,
Yeah.
depressed position. You're now ready to confront the world.
Yeah.
That's how I understand it, at least myself.
Yeah. Where's the just for a second. So, in the British Institute, there were a number of people who did not accept either the Freudian, the traditional Freudian, or the traditional Kleinian point of view. And they were called the independent group. And they included people like D.W. Winnicott, who wrote Playing in Reality, Charles Rycroft, who was Ronnie's psychoanalyst when Ronnie was doing his training. Winnicott was one of his supervisors, and Charles Rycroft was his psychoanalyst. Okay. So there were a number of people that were neither Freudian, and they were interested in something they called object relations. Object relations. Anyone else we should mention before we break? What about the strange case of Wilhelm Reich?
Wilhelm Reich.
Wilhelm Reich. Now there's a story. Wilhelm Reich. Who was Wilhelm Reich?
Inventor of the orgone
He
box.
was not a rock star. Okay. And he never listened to Virgin Radio or anything like that, okay?
The inventor of the orgone box.
Ooh, now there is a trip in itself.
He built one.
What's the orgone box?
The orgone box.
And the orgone accumulator.
And the orgone what is orgone? What is orgone?
The ether.
Reich used to wander around in a white coat. He was a doctor. And he used to look in his microscope. And when he looked in his microscope, he could see the orgone energy there. Right? It was objectively observable.
Anybody can see. No, really. It's those little things that float around in your eyes.
Oh, I was wondering what those were.
Yeah, those are.
I thought they were called floaters.
No, not those little. If you look, you'll see there's a sort of. Anyway.
Yeah. There's a wonderful movie, if you can ever see it. It's called W.R. Mysteries of the Orgasm.
This is on where? A documentary?
Yeah, kind of a documentary film made, I think, by a Yugoslavian filmmaker. Back in the days where there was something called Yugoslavia. And it was a very interesting film about Wilhelm Reich. Wilhelm Reich was thrown out of the Psychoanalytic Association because he was too Marxist. And he was kicked out of the the German Communist Party, because he was too psychoanalytic. One of his books is called Character Analysis. Character Analysis. And there was something that was popular, I don't know what's happened to it now, but there was something that was popular that was called bioenergetics. Remember bioenergetics, Shelley?
Still around.
Is it still around?
Just dealing with somebody who's been involved, yeah.
Really? Okay. And this was derived from Wilhelm Reich's point of view. So in this movie, there were a couple of strange things. They interviewed his barber. They decided to interview his barber. And you know what his barber said?
A cut above?
No. No, he said, he's the only one who comes for a haircut and asks me to comb his hair straight up, like that. He had, he was virulently anti-gay, virulently. And there was a Norwegian, a gay Norwegian psychologist that wanted to come and study with him. And you know what his response was when he found out he was gay? I will have nothing to do with that Schweinerei. Schweinerei. Okay. Filth.
Well, he was one of the major impetuses of the free love movement in the 20s.
Well, yes, in a way you're right. And when we come to David Cooper, I mean, David Cooper also had this total fascination with orgasms.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, were you there, Shelley, when David came in
I was there.
at Convocation Hall? And the first question he asked the audience was, I want to know who here is the product of an orgasmic fuck. Remember that?
I do.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah.
from a psychodynamic perspective,
Yeah.
Wilhelm Reich took Freud's sexual thing
Yeah.
to its, and basically said people have repressed their body's capacity to have an orgasmic experience, which
Yeah.
is a natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And his psychotherapy was focused on freeing people's armor and their body, working
Yes.
with their bodies so that they
Yes.
could actually have a restoration of their total orgasmic capacity, which was a very healing experience for
Yeah.
the body. So
Yeah.
that was
They would
from a
be
psychodynamic
capable
perspective.
of what David would call an orgasmic fuck. And one of the ways they could do that was by going into the organ box. I think.
That was another development where he sort of got cosmic, and that's
He
thought to
became,
be
yeah, he
not
became,
psychodynamics.
he
That was
became,
more
in his later
mystical or-
years, he was locked up in a psychiatric ward, Wilhelm Reich. Have you ever been locked
He
up
was
in
an
a
11
psychiatric-
ward.
No.
Never.
He
Never
was
had
in
that
Leavenworth.
pleasure.
Well, he's actually
He was in Leavenworth where he died.
Leavenworth?
Yeah, he was busted for interstate commerce violations.
Oh, yeah,
Sending organ boxes to
yeah.
different states.
Yeah, he was sending, he
He
was
sent organ
sending
boxes across
organ
state
boxes
lines, state
across the state,
From
and they
Maine,
hadn't
yeah.
been approved by the Food and Drug Administration,
Right.
so.
But he thought he was in protective custody.
Yeah. But while he was being interviewed by the psychiatrist, is Leavenworth a prison or a psychiatric?
It's a federal prison.
It's a federal
He
prison.
was probably in
Okay.
the psychiatric branch of it.
Yeah, well, while he was in the psychiatric branch of it, the psychiatrist came into the room and started to interview him, and suddenly there were airplanes overhead. And you know what he said? They're watching me.
and they were watching you. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching you.
I know! This is the weird thing, Shelley.